Welcome back to the 3 Tech live show here on a Sunday night, week one edition. Trey Reeves, Mitch Mason. We just watched Miami knock off Notre Dame, and that one go final big win for the Canes. We're going to talk Texas going into the shoe and just being shut down, quite frankly. Arch Manning had a terrible debut to his 2025 season. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about LSU and their win over Clemson. Are the Tigers perhaps the best team in the land? Plenty of other headlines to get to as well. Alabama looking average against Florida State as Tommy Castellanos backs up his trash talk. But Trey, a lot to get to here tonight. It was beautiful to have college football on our TVs all weekend long. We're technically not done yet. We've got TCU, North Carolina tomorrow night, but we'll talk about that at a later time. It just feels like all is right in the world, my friend.
Absolutely. The first full slate I wrote in our Saturday Storylines article, it just hits different. And from game day early in the morning, honoring Coach Corso, which, by the way, I was personally concerned that was going to go horribly wrong and that ESPN was going to somehow fumble that. I thought it was perfection. The way that they had the band spelling him out, spelling out his name. It was in the stadium. The whole stadium could see it. Fox even got in on it. Showing the simulcast on Fox as well. So shout out to Coach Corso. Just wanted to start with that. But yeah, after that, we were treated to just a lot of defense. The defenses were certainly ahead of the offenses in these big games. We finally got a little bit of an offensive breakout there at the very end of Notre Dame, Miami that we'll talk about in a little bit. But defenses certainly had their way in a lot of the other big time matchups this weekend. I guess to be expected, with the storyline being that everything was so new on the offensive side of the ball, all offseason, new quarterbacks, new wide receivers for a lot of big schools. But yeah, I loved it. I loved taking it all in all weekend long. And like I said, we still got one more tomorrow. That's the beauty of week one.
It is, and boy, comes at the perfect time every day, getting a Labor Day weekend, a long weekend, gives us time to get projects done, keep the wives happy while also getting to enjoy a bunch of college football. And it certainly seems like you guys have done that as well. As the YouTube chat's filling up, folks are hanging out with us on Twitter. If you're brand new to the show, finding us for the first time, we are so delighted to have you as part of the Jimmies and the Joes at 3Tech Pod on all social media is where you can find us. We picked up the Instagram just a little bit. That's been really active. Trey, we're making graphics for a lot of big games. Came up with a template for that for week one. We're really up in the video game, the reels, the clips, etc. Our interview with Peter Burns did quite well, I would say, and I put a reel up after the LSU win over Clemson. He called it, obviously an LSU fan, but he called exactly why that defense would step up and get a win over Clemson. So plenty of reasons to be following us. But Trey, I don't think we really have to butter up the pleasantries. Everybody's kind of got those warm, fuzzy feelings going on. How about we dive right into the game that just wrapped up? If you're listening to this podcast Monday morning, Tuesday morning, whenever, obviously Miami just beat Notre Dame. And, Trey, it was a game that felt like it was getting away from Notre Dame in the first half. But credit to the Irish and their coordinators. They're much maligned coordinators in Denbrock and Chris Ash, who's the new defensive coordinator. They did make some adjustments. They got Notre Dame back in that game, but ultimately the Canes and Mario Cristobal do get a big-time hometown win, 27-24. What stood out to you the most about Miami's win over the Irish?
It was the Miami defense. We highlighted in the preview show, especially in the first half, we've highlighted in the previous show that they needed to make CJ Carr uncomfortable. It was, of course, his first road start. The path to victory there, we were a little concerned that CJ Carr, even though he was in his first start, was going to have a lot more help on the offensive side of the ball than what Miami had. But Miami did a fantastic job of just making Carr completely uncomfortable. He finally did settle in there at the end. And he led some really nice drives to ultimately tie the game before Miami kicked that game-winning field goal. But that was really encouraging for me to see that they were able to keep CJ Carr uncomfortable, keep the ground game relatively in check. It wasn't until the very end that Jeremiah Love finally started ripping off a couple big runs. They got Love involved in the passing game as well. But yeah, hats off to this Miami defense. That was not something I was expecting to be the storyline in the game, but them keeping the Notre Dame offense down for so long was just huge for getting this victory tonight.
Yeah, and I think that's the number one thing that Notre Dame fans are probably most frustrated with coming out of this game. Jeremiah Love was at one point referenced as being in the witness protection program by Sean McDonough. He was just MIA for most of that game, just 33 yards on 10 carries. It was weird seeing Jadarian Price get the majority of the carries, but on top of all of that, it was weird watching Notre Dame not run the football. We thought if there was one constant, one identity for this Irish team, it was going to be winning the battle along that offensive line and moving the chains on the ground. And that just wasn't the case. We had a lot of screens, a lot of short passes for Carr, which was great to see him get comfortable. And I thought CJ Carr was very poised, sure made some mistakes, but I thought for his first game, top 10 environment on the road, I was very impressed with how he played today. But I just felt like he wasn't set up for success in reference to the whole game plan because Notre Dame just really didn't commit to the run.
No, they didn't. And you're right. I think I see what they were trying to do. They came out throwing the ball. Did they even run on their first possession?
I
I
don't
don't
think
remember
so.
if they even attempted to run on their first possession. But yeah, they were trying to get him comfortable and trying to get him in the flow of the game. But then when you have a pass that loses yardage on the first possession, you
Yeah.
have, just things go off script very quickly. The key to this game we thought was going to be Carr having a lot more help to rely on, a more established receiving core, maybe more chemistry with that receiving core, the two best running backs in the nation potentially. But credit to Miami, they took away a lot of what Notre Dame was trying to do early and they made CJ Carr uncomfortable. And then on the other side of the ball, Miami moved the ball really well, really consistently on this Irish defense that I was really concerned about that as well coming in. I even said on the preview show that I wish Miami had a tune-up game before this Notre Dame game so that they could kind of work out the kinks with this new receiving core. Carson Beck could build some chemistry, but Carson Beck, much maligned. You speaking of much maligned,
Yeah.
Carson Beck came out and had himself a really nice night. Completed over 65% of his passes, over 200 yards. He didn't need to be the hero like he needed to be last year, right? He had, a guy like Malachi Tony step up and be his number one receiver. Wasn't necessarily expecting Tony to be that guy, but he found a way to be the leading receiver in this offense. CJ Daniels had a decent debut as well. So
Yeah.
he's spreading the ball around. He has obviously more reliable receivers this year. That has to feel really good for him. And he didn't have to be the hero. He didn't have to have all of that on his shoulders. And I think you saw him play with more confidence because of that, especially on that last drive.
Yeah.
He came out there and, honestly, I saw it like when Notre Dame tied it up at 24. I was like, there's no way Miami finds a way to win this game. In my mind, I'm thinking this is just another Mario Cristobal blunder, honestly, like fumbling the bag. And uh, I came away very impressed with the poise of Carson Beck on that last drive, being able to lead them down, get them into field goal range, and then the defense closing it out one more time.
Yeah, I thought the performance of Beck was admirable, certainly. And it felt like a true dichotomy from what we saw last year at Georgia. The offensive line for Miami, much better. The running game for Miami, much better. The wide receivers, I mean, multiple people tweeted kind of the same joke that Beck went from wide receivers dropping the ball all over the place to CJ Daniels doing his best Odell Beckham Jr. Impersonation at the end of the first half. That's going to be a poster. That's going to be the top play on SportsCenter, I guarantee you. So it did feel like Beck, when he had the complete cast of characters around him, was able to shine tonight. And Miami, we didn't know how that wide receiving core would look. They lost their top 6 pass catchers from a season ago, but my goodness, CJ Daniels, Malachi Tony, who Chris Vanini tweeted that he was taking up the mantle from Ryan Williams, just a 17-year-old. So be prepared, prepare accordingly to hear that all season long. But he made the first touchdown catch of Miami's season this year. And yeah, I think, you talk about where do you go from here. Miami suddenly looks like, okay, it's all in front of them. The championship aspirations are certainly attainable. You beat a quality opponent like Notre Dame. For the Irish, it feels like we're in a very similar spot to where they were last year with Northern Illinois. Now, they don't have to bank on a top seed necessarily in the college football playoff, but being an independent without a conference game to a conference championship game to try and get them in, suddenly those margins are a lot tighter. And now you lose the first game of the season. It's going to be a quality loss. I don't think anybody's going to hold that against them, but you do have to recognize that the margin for error certainly gets a lot tighter in South Bend, and they've got a difficult schedule. I mean, we'll talk about that. We've got our week 2 preview that we might have to record tomorrow. It's it's going to be a lot of football that we've got to talk here in the next couple of days. But Notre Dame certainly is going to have to get to it. I think most importantly, they're going to have to figure out what that identity is before they get to week 2, week 3 against Texas A&M.
Yeah, they have a bye week this week. So this is a really interesting situation for them where there's clearly a lot on film that they need to clean up on both sides of the ball. And they don't really get a big, opportunity to provide that proof of concept. So whatever they're going to work on, they got to work on it against each other for 2 weeks. And they have to hope that it works out against Texas A&M, a team that's going to be looking for revenge from last season's matchup where they won in College Station. So, you almost wish that they were playing a Northern Illinois, for lack of a better random school. You almost wish that they were playing, a random MAC school or an FCS opponent this week to work out those kinks. But a lot to think about over the course of 2 weeks. It's going to be a long bye week, flying back up to South Bend and waiting on that game against Texas A&M.
No doubt. Well, if you are finding us for the first time, typically how we do this when there's not a live game on Sunday night, or if we go live on Saturday night after all of the action has been kind of concluded for the day, we start with our big 3. And typically in our preview shows, we'll highlight 3 games that you must reserve time to watch each and every Saturday. And Trey, let's go to those big 3 as we kind of recap and digest what happened in week 1. But I wrote in our notes, given that it's week 1 and we've got such a small sample size for teams, the way that I thought about writing these run sheets, coming up with my ideas
is to have wild overreactions.
I know some people will. I know a lot of people will. My idea, and I described this to my wife, I was viewing week 1 as a crime scene where we're the detectives that have come in, we're the crime scene techs. There's blood all over the place. We've got clues just up the wazoo. And our job is to record those clues to figure out what happened, why it happened, but we're not necessarily making an accusation yet, right? We're not taking something to a jury. No one's being indicted. We'll see if we can stick to that as much as we can. At least that's my personal philosophy. But as we lead into our game of the week, Ohio State beating Texas 14-7, that might be a decent framework to work off of, given that the most heralded name in all of college football had an absolute stinker in his debut.
I mean, are we ready for that conversation? Because I have some investigating that I did. I went back and watched the tape, Mitch, and it was more than this.
Let's talk about Ohio State first. We'll get to
let's talk
in a second. But the victors go the spoils.
So we should hail to the victors.
No, let's not do that. Joe's in the chat. That will not go over well with him. But let's talk Ohio State. Obviously, the story of that game was defense. 14-7. Ohio State really snuffed out any sort of offense that Texas had. They had one drive late where they got on the board. It was a nice throw to Parker Livingston. But other than that, I thought both defenses were the story here. Neither quarterback was all that comfortable. I actually felt like Julian Sayin did enough. And I mean, clearly did enough to get the win. But just from my eye test, I know there were a lot of people complaining about him on Twitter and saying he and Arch were both having terrible days. I thought Julian Sayin was fine. I felt like the game plan was much more geared around him being a first-time starter and trying to run the ball and lean into the strengths of their offense than what the Texas Longhorns did. But, when I went back and watched that again, I was just struck by the fact that no matter how many pieces rotate out for Texas and Ohio State, both of these defenses just felt like the cream of the crop in the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, the defenses were the story. I will defend Julian Sayin because I think there were like 3 drops that I
Oh
think
yeah.
could have made that stat line look a lot prettier, like maybe pushing for 200 yards, honestly. There was a drop that Jeremiah Smith had where he just lost focus as he was turning the corner, and there were not a lot of white jerseys in between him and the end zone. He had another drop on the first drive that was a big one, I believe. And yeah, just throughout the game, the receivers, after he switched the gloves, I think he was fine. They had to highlight that on the broadcast.
They
But
did.
I thought Julian Sayin had a really solid game. He made some really nice throws. He was composed in the pocket. It wasn't like he had a clean pocket the entire day. The Texas defensive line was getting to the quarterback. And Brian in the chat is absolutely right. Julian Sayin did not have a run game that he could lean on. They were kind of trying to cycle through Peoples and Donaldson. Is it CJ Donaldson?
CJ Donaldson, yeah, West
Yeah,
Virginia
CJ
transfer.
Donaldson from West Virginia.
Hmm.
I thought Donaldson had a lot more burst. I thought he should probably be getting the majority of the carries in that offense, but they're cycling through. Neither of them were crazy effective against that Texas front. So I thought, all things considered, Julian Sayin played a really nice game, and I was really encouraged by what I saw and saw the poise that he showed under fire from that Texas defensive line as things were going wrong with his receiving core dropping passes. He never really faltered, and he never really made a big mistake that was going to cost the team the game. And
Yeah.
to your point, debut coordinator Brian Hartline, I thought called a really solid game to put him in a good position to win. It wasn't a lot of complex. It was a lot of, hey, make this read, make this throw, get settled in. They had a couple really nice drives where they drove down the length of the field and finished one of them off on 4th and goal, which was huge. And they did just enough to win on offense. And at the end of the day, that's all you can really ask for in your brand new starting quarterback. On the other side of the ball, I'm pretty encouraged by the Texas defense. I
Sure.
think it looks early on, the early returns are that this is going to be a defense dominated team. And they are going to have to win with that defense once again this year because they made Ohio State really uncomfortable. They took away that ground game. They really couldn't reliably. There were times where Ohio State got yards and chunks on the ground, but they couldn't reliably get, a 3 or 4 yards on first
Hmm.
down and set themselves up ahead of the chains. Texas did a really good job. They played physical in the secondary against those Ohio State receivers. They made Jeremiah Smith really uncomfortable at times. Um, and yeah, I thought did a really good job getting it, giving their offense a chance to win the game. The offense just did not take the baton and play complimentary football.
Yeah, only 126 yards passing for Julian Sayin. I think it's 89 total yards on the ground for Ohio State. So, I mean, the Texas defense passed the test with flying colors. That was a tremendous job from Pete Kwiatkowski's unit. But you do have to flip it to the other side of the script. And again, I'm going to let you cook here. I will say my observation on Arch Manning, he never looked comfortable. I think overall his decision making was pretty terrible for most of the game. And I thought the offensive line did a decent job of keeping him clean. I mean, yes, of course, when you have a pass rush like Ohio State's and you've got a linebacking core like Arvell Reese that really stood out in this game, you're going to have busts. But overall, I felt like Texas's offensive line gave them a chance to be able to throw the ball down the field. The thing was, you had the combination of Arch just not looking comfortable, and I think you've got to give flowers to Matt Patricia on the defensive side for Ohio State as well. Kyle Van Noy, NFL linebacker, actually tweeted that he said the game plan looked very similar from what Matt Patricia dialed up in 2016 and 2017 when he was with the Patriots coaching against Steve Sarkisian with the Falcons. And he basically said that he just used the recipe for success, keeping safeties over the top of the wide receivers, taking away those easy throw lanes and making the quarterback dump it underneath. For Arch Manning, he just didn't take a lot of those dump downs. And when he did try and throw it down the field, the ball didn't have a lot of zip on it. There's some speculation that he may be dealing with a shoulder injury. That's speculation at this point. There's not a confirmed report out there that we've seen. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Texas ran him out there as QB1, and they suffered the consequences of it.
It was rough from the very first pass. he skipped it up 5 yards short of his wide receiver that was open on the
Yeah.
first pass. And whether it was jitters, whether it was nerves, whether it was a poor game plan, whether it was not calling the plays that Arch was the most comfortable with, or whether it was just a really bad off day, it was a rough day at the office for Arch Manning. Now, before the Texas fans freak out, I'm not writing him off completely for his career with what I'm about to say. That being said, I think I counted 6 or 7 throws that you would expect an average
Yeah.
FBS quarterback to make without a lot of problems throughout the course of that game. He was 2 or 3 good throws at the end of the game away from this being an outright embarrassing stat line. Mitch, before he hit Livingstone on that sideline route, which was a great throw, I think it was right before their second time where they turned it over on 4th down in the red zone. They didn't score on that drive, but he has set them up in the red zone with a really nice throw to Livingstone. He was at 2.6 yards per attempt with about 10 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. Like that is unthinkably bad when you look at that statistic. And it wasn't, I saw a lot of talk on Twitter that Sark was not doing a good job of giving him throws to get in rhythm. He was. And that's the thing that's really concerning to me. Whether it was a mesh route that Arch just throws at the feet of the receiver in a clean pocket, or that first play of the game where it was a really nice route concept. I can't remember who the actual intended receiver was, but he was breaking on a corner route and Arch just underthrows him by 5 yards, doesn't step into the throw, throws off his back foot and skips it into him.
Yeah.
It was really concerning, man. And I know I'm watching this with biased eyes. I know that I fully admit that. But I don't think you can look at me as a Texas fan right now and say that you're not concerned by that performance.
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, I think the level-headed take is that there's plenty of optimism, there's plenty of talent to fall back on, but oh my goodness,
It was his third career start, right?
For this to be the first road start, for this to be his third career start, very, very concerning for Arch and all the hope and the hype. And listen, none of that's his fault. None of that was Arch's fault. He was crowned as this Heisman. Give him the Heisman Trophy already by the media, right? And all the fans. That is not Arch's fault.
Absolutely.
But the performance was suboptimal, and he owned that. I mean, humble kid, nice kid. He owned that in the press conference, and good on him. I hope he takes this, and I hope he builds on it, and I hope he has a great performance to kind of shut everybody up. But yeah, I mean, the throws that he did need to make, whether it be for first downs, whether it be for chunk plays, they weren't there. They weren't there. And he had short hops to open wide receivers. He had Ryan Wingo over the middle in a critical late game spot that he threw the ball kind of high and behind him. They don't end up converting the first down. It was just throws that were off by just enough that end up holding this Texas offense back.
And maybe that's the Ohio State secondary too, right? Like he is maybe seeing a little bit of ghost because that is one of the best secondaries in the country. But it wasn't. Some of those were not throws that you need a 5-star future number 1 overall pick to make, and that's what's concerning.
Should be able to trot out there and make that throw.
Yeah, like it's not even one that you need to throw perfect on the college football video game, and you're probably going to get a first down.
Well, and like I said, I mean,
and we saw the ceiling though, like that touchdown pass that he threw, absolute dot
in a window.
Yeah, and we saw the ceiling to there too. So there's enough there to still be optimistic about for sure. I'm not, like I said, I'm not writing him off as a complete bust yet, but man, there's a lot to work on in the film room, and they get a nice little runway before going to the swamp in a couple weeks. They'll have some time to work out those kinks with a couple home games against G5 opponents, but it's a lot to work on.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Texas running game be leaned on a little bit more. It felt like Texas, they had 166 yards rushing. Like they were able to get those yards. Now they weren't able to win the short yardage situation. Ohio State stuffed them a couple of times, including down on the goal line. But Trey Wisner, 16 carries for 80 yards, $5 a carry. CJ Baxter had 40 yards. Arch had 38 yards scrambling. Ryan Wingo had a little 8-yard pitch play. Texas was able to rack up the rushing yards, but it felt like maybe they went away from what was working in an effort to try and get Arch into a comfortable zone to then open up some sort of passing game. At a certain point, I know all of Twitter was like, why is Texas not just running this football? I mean, they've got the athletes, find ways to get guys open with motion and do what you need to do. But it did feel like maybe the one thing that was consistently working, Sark went away from just a little bit. We'll wrap it
Well, it
up
was
with,
working real quick, Mitch. It was working between the 20s, but
yeah,
that's kind of been the problem with Texas, right? The running game has been
sure.
great between the 20s under Steve Sarkisian, but when that zone, when they're in the red zone and everything's compacted, they suddenly lose the ability to do that. That's not a new
Yeah.
problem. That did not develop on Saturday. That's been a long running issue for the Longhorn offense under Steve Sarkisian. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that they've got to figure out, at whether it's a new wrinkle for a defense to think about if they put on film and against a G5 opponent, whether it's just getting a little bit more creative, maybe not a toss sweep on the goal line, like in the Cotton Bowl last year, but getting just a little bit more creative, because again, they tried to run right at the teeth of that Ohio State defense multiple times and they couldn't get the 1 yard when they needed it, when the threat of going over the top wasn't there.
I think my takeaway, if I was to distill it into just kind of a 2 point sentence, I would say Ohio State looked remarkably consistent. I think the foundation to go win against the rest of their schedule and build up for those big games like Penn State, I think is certainly there. I think it's a lot of rinse and repeat for Ohio State, even with Brian Hartline as the OC and now Matt Patricia as the DC. Really did enjoy the game plan that he dialed up. For Texas, I think they are a good team. I think the great element going to the SEC championship game again, being able to compete for a national title, that is locked behind the door of having a very good QB1, if not a great QB1. When you had Texas fans tweeting pictures of Quinn Ewers, you knew that they were in a little bit of hell, right? And so Arch will get better. Like I said, if he's not healthy, you hope he gets healthy. And there will be a progression and a learning curve for Arch as he takes on this mantle. But we have to be honest. If Texas is going to reach those highest of highs, that is locked behind the door of a great QB1. And, Arch is going to have to pick it up. There's no doubt about it. All right, let's go to Death Valley. Some are saying maybe not the real Death Valley after LSU marches in and beats Clemson 17-10. Just to get that out of the way, Clemson is actually the real Death Valley. It was called that before LSU did, and Baton Rouge, etc. But bragging rights go to the Bayou Bengals, who do emerge from Clemson, South Carolina, with a 17-10 victory. And Trey, in my notes, the first thing that I wrote, hearkening back to our discussion that we had with Peter Burns of the SEC Network and ESPN, this LSU team, if they play like the version we saw on Saturday night and they clean up some of those mistakes, this version of LSU could be the best team in the country. And boy, it felt like at times they played like it under the lights.
I was really impressed with the defense. I mean, I feel like that's rinse and repeat with a lot of these big games this week. Like I said off the top, the defenses certainly showed out more than the offenses. But that year two Blake Baker jump looks real. If anything, if this is going to be any indication of what the rest of the season looked like, we didn't see the lapses in focus like we saw last year, right? We saw LSU go into a hostile road environment, a situation where they've really struggled under Brian Kelly, quite frankly, and handle it like pros and not get loose focus, not make a dumb mistake, not turn the ball over when they shouldn't on offense. And they went into a very hostile environment and the defense led the way. So that was very, very encouraging for me to see LSU as we think about the other hostile environments that they're going to have to go into for the rest of the year. But I really got to give this offensive line some flowers, because that was the biggest concern for me. We highlighted on the preview show that it was going to be the two tackles were likely going to have a combination of one start between the two of them coming into this game. They're going up against two of the better defensive ends in the entire country. They largely kept Garrett Nussmeier clean and gave him time to operate the offense. They opened up some holes for Caden Durham. That was another big encouraging thing for LSU. Run game was non-existent last year, and Caden Durham had himself a nice little day. Didn't get to the century mark, but had 74 yards on the ground is definitely good against that Clemson defense. And yeah, just a professional workman-like win for LSU. That's something that we haven't always seen under Brian Kelly, especially on the road. It's felt like under Brian Kelly, it's either been just blowing the opponent out or playing down to the competition in a spot where they really shouldn't. And this was a spot where they showed themselves to be the aggressor, weathered an early storm where they got down 10-3, didn't blink, and found a way to be the more physical, dominant, traditional LSU team in this one. I think you're muted.
Thank you for that.
You're no problem.
I'm
Week one for us too. Week one for us too.
And just quick disclaimer: if I do cut out on the live stream, or if you're listening to this on the podcast and suddenly I disappear, it's because it is raining cats and dogs outside my house right now. So trying to keep the thunder off the microphone. The offensive line gave up only 1 sack. That was the biggest thing that we highlighted throughout both those previews. Was this offensive line we felt like was going to get run through by that defensive front from Clemson, not just the front four, but the linebackers as well. Any sort of blitzes that Dabo would dial up. LSU's offensive line handled that. Now, did he give up 8 tackles for loss? That's something that's got to get cleaned up. But Garrett Nussmeier stayed protected for the vast majority of that game. The wide receiver core for LSU looked so buttoned
deep,
up, right?
Very,
very deep. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different pass catchers on Saturday night, led by Aaron Anderson, who had 6 for 99. You had Barian Brown, the Kentucky transfer, get 5 for 25 as well. I mean, they were just loaded. It felt like anybody that they threw out there was going to give them a chance to get open. And because of that, because you had a good QB protection, because you had talented weapons out there making plays, Garrett Nussmeier looked very solid. Did he light the world on fire? No, of course not. 230 yards, 28 to 38, a touchdown, did not turn the ball over crucially. But that was what it took for LSU to weather the storm in a very hostile environment against a defense that I think is going to be one of the best. I mean, Clemson loses this game. They gave up 17 points to maybe one of the best offenses in college football. The issue was not on the defensive side for Clemson. We'll talk about Cade Klubnik and the offense and their struggles here in a minute. But LSU looked as professional, as prepared for a big game moment that I can remember under Brian Kelly. And you mentioned when they go on the road, especially, that's when the struggles seem to emerge. It's felt like when Kelly's teams start to make those mistakes, when they start to have those miscommunications, when they start to have those lapses in judgment, it snowballs. And it might be one position group that makes the initial mistake, but it's going to spread to the rest of the team. And that's how we've seen LSU falter time and time again over these last few years. And you have Brian Kelly pounding tables at the end of the game because it felt like, man, we should have won this. We had it, and we snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And Saturday night, LSU did not do that. And so I think if this program has reached that next rung of the ladder, if they can play consistent football, even when they don't always have their A+ game. And I don't think LSU would say that they brought their A+ game to Clemson. It was week 1. It was a tough road environment, but they found a way to win. And in this sport, man, that is worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely. And they had, I think the spot where it could have spiraled for LSU was that I can't remember what it was called on the field, but the ultimately no touchdown catch that I think was
brutal ruling.
Which I think the quote of the broadcast, I think it was Herb Street that said that if that didn't make the bar for the catch, then the bar might be too high or something along those lines. That's where it could have started to go wrong, right? You might see a previous LSU team take that moment where it really didn't go your way, really frustrating situation, and it just spirals from there. But you're right. They weathered that storm. They found a way. When a lot was not going right on the offensive side of the ball, and Clemson was frustrating a lot of what your offense wanted to do, the defense didn't let that affect them. And that was really, really encouraging. We can transition now, I guess, into talk about Clemson's offense because, man, I guess question for you throwing it back, did we underestimate the I don't want to say it's not a lack of talent, but lack of a clear dude in the running back room for Clemson? Because
Well,
I think we kind of just assumed they would figure that out,
yeah.
and they probably will over the course of ACC play. I don't think that they're going to face a lot of defensive fronts with the amount of talent that LSU has throughout the rest of their schedule, but that's something that I think we might have been overlooking when we were predicting this game in particular.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think a lot of people thought that five-star true freshman, whose name is escaping me, Gideon something, uh,
Davidson. Yeah.
Davidson. Yes, I,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people thought he was going to come in and just immediately be him. He
He
had
didn't even get a carry,
he did
right?
not get a carry. No, supposedly he had a great camp and was right there, but no, the
I
leading
took him in
rusher.
I took him in a couple underdog drafts because of the camp nuggets, and I was pretty frustrated.
Yeah, Adam Randall leads the team in rushing, 5 carries, 16 yards, 3.2 a carry. The team had 32 total yards rushing. It was just a non-factor for the Tigers, and it made Clemson's offense extremely one-dimensional. And unfortunately, Cade Klubnik had another rough opener. I mean, this has just kind of been the story with him. Is boy, it takes a minute for Cade to turn the engine over. And I had a tweet last year after they lost to Texas, where basically I said, hey, the whole college football community, including us, owes Cade a huge apology because he figured it out this year and he continued to get negative headlines and he continued to get dunked on social media. But look what he's done over the course of the year. Um, we're right back to square one though, where it's like, oh, gotta hold my tongue. Gotta remember that there's a lot. A week one overreaction would not look good come the ACC championship game, come Clemson getting into the playoff. But there's no doubt that Klubnik did not play the way that Clemson needed him to. He didn't play certainly anywhere close to what we've seen him reach as a ceiling before. And 19 to 38, some really bad misses, some moments where he looked lost. 230 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. You know,
Could have
at
had a
the
couple more picks too.
could have had a couple more picks. If this happens to a quarterback at, I don't know, insert 7-5 school here. Oh well, on to the next. But when this happens at Clemson, when you are the runaway favorite to win the ACC in the preseason, when you are one of the top 2 or 3 most popular predictions to win a national championship, the lights are brighter and the scrutiny is going to be turned up a little bit more. And there's no doubt that Cade failed that test on Saturday, which I know he's got to be frustrated about. And I'm sure Clemson fans are kind of pulling their hair out and wondering if this is a little bit of a here we go again.
Yeah, I mean, you said it there at the end. I think the concern is that we are right back to square one, but the optimism is that we have seen him develop throughout a season before, just last year. So I'm not ready. Just like I was saying with Arch, I'm definitely not ready to write off Cade Klubnik
No.
in 2025. The Heisman tickets that people might have bet on might be getting close to needing to dispose of those, but I think that he as they find that run game and as they find which of their I think the other thing is when we think about some of the best Clemson teams of the past, right? We think about just a dominant receiver, T. Higgins, Justin Ross, just a lot of the great quarterbacks that we think of from Clemson had a dude at receiver that was going to be the dominant number one. I think Clemson has a very nice deep receiving core. I think they need to figure out who their alpha is. And I think they'll get a chance to figure that out as the schedule softens up a little bit from a really tough opener.
Well, and I think it was supposed to be Antonio Williams, right? And
It
then didn't
was,
he
yeah.
got hurt right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And did not record a pass catch. So I don't even know if he returned to that game to be quite honest. But yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Brian Wesco Jr., 4 catches for 66. TJ Moore, 4 for 55. Those freshmen from a season ago that had to step up. They're sophomores now. They're not rookies. They've got some skins on the wall. They certainly should be able to carry this wide receiver core if asked to. But I think Antonio Williams is supposed to be that guy, and obviously he was missing from the box score from Saturday night. So again, it's week one. I would caution folks jumping off the Clemson bandwagon. Listen, as a Clemson national championship ticket holder, we took a hit, but certainly not losing the faith. It's a long season. For LSU, though, boy, you got to be over the moon. I believe I've forgotten what the exact stat was, but LSU football tweeted it out. I think Dabo was like 100 and something and 11 when leading at half. Clemson was up 10-3. And LSU tweeted now he's 100 and whatever and 12 after the
Yeah.
LSU Fighting Tigers came to town, which was just a beautiful little dig, extra dig there from the Bayou Bengals. But those are our big three. Write in, let us know what you thought of those three games: Ohio State over Texas, LSU over Clemson, Miami pulling it out over Notre Dame. We'd love to know who your stars of those games are, where you feel as far as temperature goes on the winning teams, on the losing teams as well. But Trey, let's transition for the rest of the show into the weekend headlines. And boy, week one, the first few weeks always feel like just scatter shooting once you get out of the big three, because there's so many games going on. There were like 91 college football games this weekend, and it felt like you had to pay attention to every single one of them because it was so early on in the season. But no doubt we have to start in Tallahassee with our weekend headlines. Florida State imposing their will over Alabama. We clowned Tommy Castellanos for trash talking the Tide back in June, and by God, he went on and backed it up. And I, for one, am tip of the cap, give him his flowers. I doubted him, and he came through.
I feel like the Shaq meme that I was not familiar with your game. I was not familiar that you had that level of dog in you. And yeah, tip of the hat. Tommy Castellanos put that team on his back. Man, that felt like the least Alabama team that I've seen since pre-Saban.
Sure did.
Like maybe Saban year one. They look disinterested, Mitch. Like we are big Kalen DeBoer fans on this show. We are big Ryan Grubb fans on this show. I am very concerned about this spiraling for Alabama, because not only were they were multi-touchdown favorites, they're 14.5-point favorites at the close on this one. They lacked focus after the first offensive possession. Your offense goes down, they score, they have a really nice drive for Ty Simpson's first as a starter, but your defense just never locks in. And sometimes you see teams that are obviously overconfident at the beginning. They kind of get punched in the mouth a little bit, and they nut up, for lack of a better term. Sorry for kids' earmuffs, I guess, but like they buck up and they find out a way to play to their potential. Alabama's defense just looked disinterested the entire time. And it wasn't like Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn wasn't exactly reinventing the wheel of his offense. Like if you just spent an offseason watching film on Gus Malzahn offenses from Auburn, UCF, wherever it might be, that's what they were running. It wasn't anything that was like shocking for a Gus Malzahn offense, but there's been clips going around singling out a couple players, but just jogging as a player's running to the sideline and letting them get a couple extra yards, not knocking a player out of bounds, knocking a player after they're already out of bounds, just dumb penalties time and time again to extend drives. It was the most disinterested and lackadaisical effort that I've seen from an Alabama defense in quite some time. And for a unit that we thought was going to be back to the elite level under Nick Saban, like, needs somebody on that side of the ball to step up and be a leader and say that that's unacceptable.
They just got bullied out of the trenches. I mean, this is, you saw that against Michigan in the bowl game. Fine, whatever. End of the year, you could make the age-old, they didn't care to be there argument, whatever. But you figured for week one on the road to open up a new season, everything in front of you. DeBoer has got his guys in Tuscaloosa. He's got his offensive coordinator. The culture has never been better, supposedly, under Kalen DeBoer. The handoff from Saban to Kalen is supposed to be still intact. And then as soon as Alabama gets a bloody lip, they bow out. They bow out. 236 yards given up on the ground, Trey. They did not look like an Alabama team. They did not look like an SEC team, quite
No.
frankly. They got pushed around. They got bullied. I know Tim Keenan was a defensive tackle was out. He's supposed to be their big run stopper. You're Alabama. Figure it out.
Figure it out, man.
There's another 5-star on the roster ready to take his place, right? And you're right. I mean, it was I'm not an Alabama fan. Obviously, you and I are fellow SEC rivals of Alabama. It was disheartening to watch Alabama not know what to do, crumble all over the field on Saturday in Tallahassee. And listen, as fun as it was to see Florida State kind of rise from the ashes and you felt the energy back in that program, I made a tweet that, this is truly the happiest, the most joy that fan base has felt since November of 2023. Close to 2 years based off of the playoff exclusion and then the disaster that was last season. It was unfathomable to see what we were watching. And listen, all of that I think falls on the defense. The offense didn't have any rhythm. They were not able to get going. Ryan Williams gets concussed late in that game on a
Ryan
late
Williams
hit.
looked like he might have been. I never want to speculate that a training staff would let this do that, and I have no inside information. Obviously, he did not look like himself even before that hit.
Yeah.
I will say.
It was bizarre. It was really bizarre. I will say the one positive that I took out of the Alabama game was I thought Ty Simpson was fine. Now, did he look like a young quarterback? And I mean, he's not really all that young, but did he look like an inexperienced quarterback? Absolutely. He had some bad mistakes that need to get cleaned up. But Simpson was not the reason you lost this game. If you're Alabama, 23 of 43, yes, the completion percentage certainly could have been better. 254 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he did enough to keep you in it. But that defense had no answer for what Gus Malzahn was throwing. They had no answer for the ground game. And, quite frankly, I think this is the one team, Trey, that if you have an overreaction to Kalen DeBoer not working out, to the program, crumbling and the dynasty being over, this is the one week one overreaction that I probably don't have a pushback against just because, maybe the standard was too lofty anyway. We were never going to keep it at Nick Saban levels. But man, to not even have a semblance of what Alabama used to be under Nick Saban and to not see that and go, oh, well, yeah, here are the ingredients. Like, we just got to get back on the tracks. This is the 4th game that DeBoer has lost now in his short tenure at Alabama where they were favored by more than 14 points.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I was ready to jump ahead of the qualifier. But,
yeah, fifth overall, but I believe it's the 4th where they were favored by multiple scores. Maybe it's multiple scores. Regardless, they've lost a lot of games that they had no business losing.
Well, they're 5-5 in their last 10. And to say that about an Alabama program is just unthinkable.
Yeah.
And again, we love Kalen DeBoer. We praised the hire when they made it.
We did.
But boy, this is feeling very Brian Harsin-y right now, that maybe the culture isn't there. Maybe this might be a situation where he job hopped a little too quickly and got promoted into a position that he maybe wasn't ready for. Again, I'm not 100% out. I think that they can, if the defense can figure out how to just have a better game plan, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Like it looked like they just didn't watch film for the entire offseason on what to expect from a Gus Malzahn offense, and that's really concerning. But if somebody on that side of the ball can step up, take ownership, and figure out how to get through to the rest of that defense that this is unacceptable, then Alabama can be right back in the thick of things. This is a non-conference loss in the grand scheme of things. They're not eliminated from anything. But I agree that if you are going to overreact to something in week 1, you overreact to this because it's not looking good right now. There's murmurs about stuff that's going on. Have you seen this with the team hotel that we're getting DoorDashes at 2 a.m. and we're letting friends into the hotel room? This is all unsubstantiated message board rumors, but would it surprise you with the performance that we saw on the field yesterday? It certainly wouldn't surprise me.
Well, no, you had guys posting TikToks dancing in the locker room after the
Yeah,
game, after a loss on the road, and,
where you got
yeah, I mean,
embarrassed. Like,
yeah.
how you need to show some semblance of pride if you're going to get embarrassed like that. Like, the lack of self awareness is very concerning.
Yeah, we needed the Tim Tebow speech after that, and instead we got TikTok dances, which, yeah, I mean, I've got Alabama friends in my texts and DMs that are furious. They don't know how to lose. They haven't had to figure out how to
No,
lose in a long time, and it's not been good. Last thing on Florida State, it wasn't just the offense that was good. The defense, they looked fast, they looked fierce. 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss against the Crimson Tide. I'm excited to see what Florida State can hopefully put together this year. And boy, if they're a contender in the ACC with Miami and Clemson, and you get Duke and Georgia Tech, like the ACC suddenly gets really, really fun in a hurry if all of those teams are firing on all cylinders. So let us know. Write in. Are you out on the Tide? Are you buying stock in Florida State? Are you investing in Knowles Coin? We'd love to hear from you guys at
yeah,
Full
you
Tech
bought
Pod.
back in. Did you buy the
No,
bottom?
I'm very content to let the market play out. I've diversified my portfolio in other areas, so I'll let y'all enjoy Knowles Coin, and I'm still living off my millions that I made from 2023. Let's transition, and we'll pick up the pace just a little bit here in the weekend headlines. Tennessee bludgeoning Syracuse, 45-26. Trey, probably the thumbnail on this video, I think, would aptly say that Tennessee won the quarterback trade. Joey Aguilar looked incredible for the Volunteers. Tennessee's offense had that verticality that we hadn't seen since Hendon Hooker was roaming the field for Rocky Top. And Tennessee's offense, man, they just looked free. They looked fast. They
Mm.
were able to do everything that they wanted. Listen, I think Syracuse is going to be a fine team. Did I regret picking them to upset Tennessee outright? Yes, obviously. I miscalculated how good the Volunteer offense would be right out of the gate, but I was so impressed with the rhythm that offense had, and it wasn't just throwing the football; they were able to run it as well. Just very composed drives all throughout that game. They put up 45 points. You have as I pull up the box score, you've got Aguilar who finishes for 247 yards, 3 touchdowns. They run for 248 yards as a team. Stark Thomas has 92. Deshaun Bishop has 82 in a score. Peyton Lewis has 38 in a score. They just kind of got whatever they wanted offensively. And for Tennessee fans, that had to be a breath of fresh air, considering just how many times you couldn't even score a point in the first half last year with Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, I well said. I think that is going to be something to monitor when they play tougher defenses. Because let's be honest, Syracuse is not the toughest test on the defensive side of the ball. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean the fireworks were back, and I think that's really really encouraging if you're a Tennessee fan. Also, the defense didn't look like it took too much as a step back. I know they gave up 26 points. A lot of that was when the offense kind of had the game in control. They kind of let their foot off the gas at the end of the first half. This one
Yeah.
could have gotten really ugly, but I mean, they were in the backfield all day long for Syracuse too. They had the defensive touchdown as well.
Yeah.
Really nice performance on that side of the ball. Some things to clean up, but I'm really encouraged by Tennessee. Probably my biggest riser in the country when in terms of stock price, maybe outside of Florida State. Florida State definitely took a big jump, but among the teams that were already ranked in the top 25, we'll say Tennessee, I think, had the biggest jump in my perception of them this week.
Yeah. 5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. They had the interception of Angeli as well. They've got East Tennessee State this next week, but then week 3, Georgia comes to Neyland Stadium, and suddenly that game that maybe we wrote off a little bit in the preseason, just kind of assuming, this is going to be a step back for Tennessee. No way that they are a playoff contender. At least those were, some of the ideas that we threw around in the preseason. Suddenly this looks like, maybe it's a top 15 matchup if Tennessee can, rise. If some other teams fall, we had what, 3 or 4 losses inside the top 8 here in week 1. So anything's possible early on as the field kind of sorts itself out. But Then,
Gunnar Stockton looked really good too.
he did.
I'm all of a sudden really excited about that quarterback matchup.
Yeah, I needed Nate Frazier to get a couple more carries, couple more yards from a fantasy team there. But yeah, Georgia looks operational offensively. I think you're right. Gunnar Stockton looked good. But after that, Trey, here's the rest of their schedule. After Georgia in week 3, they've got UAB, who almost lost to Alabama directional, Mississippi State, Arkansas, at Alabama, at Kentucky. They host Oklahoma, New Mexico State, at Florida versus Vanderbilt. I mean, suddenly you can talk yourself into a Rocky Top return to the playoff if all things
It's
go
in
according to
they
plan.
play in Tuscaloosa.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not excited to pick Alabama in that game even at home right now.
Not right now.
So you're looking at needing to win 2 out of 3 of Georgia, Alabama, and Florida
Yeah.
to give yourself a mulligan somewhere else, essentially. And
Yeah.
tall task to be sure, but definitely not looking impossible, like I would have said a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, suddenly the sightlines are there. So, hey, will Tennessee make a return to the playoff? Please let us know in the comments. The Bulls, Trey, they were running in Tampa, and we got a lot of comments posthumously on our YouTube prediction for USF and Boise State. Felt a
We
little
picked
bit
USF plus 6.5, to
plus
be
the six
fair.
and a half. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think we had a lot of Bulls fans that heard the first half of the video, maybe not the second half of the video. We were all on Alex Golish keeping that one close. Did
They
we
were also
expect
chirping back at the very confident Boise State fans in the comment section that were
that is true?
predicting 24-point wins, saying Maddox Madsen was going to throw for 400 yards. Sire Gaines
Ooh,
was better than Ashton Genty. There were some very
there were
bold
some
claims
takes.
made by the blue and orange in that comment section.
There were some takes, a lot of takes that were very much unsubstantiated. Uh 34-7. South Florida rolls over Boise State. Give the winners their flowers. Byron Brown looked amazing. Didn't throw for a touchdown, did rush for 2 touchdowns. Yeah, 14 carries, 43 yards. But honestly, it wasn't a game where you needed Byron Brown throwing for 400 yards to see the potential of this offense, right? The main thing was, is the kid healthy? Cool. He's going to go ball. And with this revamped roster that South Florida has, you saw the speed and the physicality on display. And listen, I spent a long time in that preview video setting up what USF has done and put together, right? Where they wanted to build the program like Boise State. They wanted to build it in order to beat Boise State. And they went out and did it, man. And they did it on home turf in front of their fans. And boy, now it feels like just so much stock up for USF. And now Alex Golish might have Miami and Florida sweating a little bit here in their next 2 games.
Man, if they can find a way to steal one of those, they're
Oh,
immediately the G5 playoff
sure.
like favorite, right? And
Yeah,
I think expanding on USF, because yeah, absolutely, it was an amazing performance. Love the fake punt, by the way, where they just snuck the
sure.
backup quarterback out there. That was peak college football. No one noticing it on the Boise State side. Just amazing. But the American as a whole did a lot of work. This is something I highlighted at the end of our preview show this week, but the American as a whole did a lot of good PR this week to kind of build that perception back up, to take back a lot of goodwill, I think, for what the committee is going to look at. You look at Tulane dominating Northwestern. You look at some other schools around the country, around the conference, Rice even
Yeah.
beating Louisiana out of nowhere. Like that, those don't seem like big wins, but those all count when it comes to the perception battle of these G5 conferences. So an American champ, it's always going to be up against it because they're going to have a tougher schedule to get to 11-1 or 12-0 versus a Boise State of last year, where they really only had one super challenging game that they lost. So, yeah, I mean, this is a really important week for the American. This, I can't be overstated how big this win was for not just South Florida as a program, but for that conference as a whole to keep winning that PR battle and try to get a team into the playoff.
Chaz Nimrod, Tennessee transfer, 3 catches, 96 yards. Keyshawn Singleton, 5 for 93 in a touchdown. Cartavius Norton didn't factor in a ton to the ball game, but I think he's going to be a weapon on the ground for them. They had Alvin Isaac, who got 3 carries for 52 yards, very efficient there. So a lot of weapons for USF. And man, the talent, like I said, on display, very, very high on the Bulls. For Boise State, wow, there was no identity to this team. They could not run the football. They had 122 yards dispersed throughout the game, but when they needed to run to establish a drive, they were unable to do it. Sire Gaines was getting stopped. Malik Sherrod, 11 carries for 27 yards. I mean, he really couldn't do much at all. They averaged just 3.2 a carry. And then Maddox Madsen, quite frankly, was dreadful throwing the football. This Boise offense just looked out of sync. They looked overwhelmed by the speed.
Looked out athleted. Yep.
They did, which, credit to the Bulls. A lot of fans were saying, hey, look at our transfer portal. And we highlighted that there were so many new faces brought in from Power 5 or Power 4 programs that Alex Golish was maybe assembling a G5 Death Star. And boy, they looked good. They passed that test in week 1.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't give enough flowers to South Florida. It was an awesome performance. Really great scene down there, and excited to see if they can run through the American. That race has certainly becomes a lot more interesting with them throwing their hat in the ring.
Let's finish up with a couple of games that weren't on Saturday. Let's go back to the Thursday and Friday night headliners, specifically talking about Nebraska and Georgia Tech surviving in keeping their playoff hopes alive early, right? Those are 2 dark horses. Folks have spent a lot of time talking about whether or not they can make their way to the playoff. Could Nebraska be a dark horse in the Big Ten? Could Georgia Tech make it to the ACC championship game? Nebraska squeaks out a win, 20-17 over Cincinnati. Georgia Tech survives Colorado 27-20. Haynes King has a career night on the ground, 156 yards and 3 touchdowns, including that kind of walk-off touchdown there at the very end. What did you like? What didn't you like from Nebraska, Georgia Tech? Which of those games kind of kept your interest throughout the night?
Yeah, we can start with Nebraska, just because they almost blew it. It was almost just a spectacular blowing of that game. And I think I was encouraged by a lot of what I saw from Nebraska. And I was honestly encouraged that they found a way to still win that game, because a couple years ago, Nebraska probably still finds a way to lose that one.
Yeah.
Dylan Raiola looked very poised. I thought I was encouraged by his performance. I like what he has in the receiving core this year, but a lot of work to do, obviously, to fine tune that offense. Cincinnati was getting a little too much pressure for my liking, but the defense still looks really good. That defense is going to travel, and Cincinnati could not pass until they started playing a little bit more conservatively there at the end. As for Georgia Tech, man, they tried their best. It almost felt like they were trying their best to make it as challenging as possible for themselves, right out of the gate. 3 turnovers in the first half, just
in their first 3 possessions.
First 3 possessions, right out the gate, turning it over 3 times. But Haynes King, man, like, what more can we say about him that hasn't already been said? It feels like the more that, if you're thinking about it in like a CFB 26 frame, like the more the body wear is turning red, it feels like the better that he gets every single week.
Yeah, no, someone joked that his X factor activates when the wear and tear goes full red. As soon as Haynes King starts limping, that's when you should be concerned.
Really concerned. Yeah, because you're going to lose.
He's activating at that point. I mean, first snap of the game, fumbles the snap. Second possession, a couple of snaps in, fumbles that exchange, and then follows that up with an interception on the third possession. It was a dang miracle that Georgia Tech was only down 7-0 after that just cavalcade of errors. I thought Caden Salter found it, especially in the middle portion of that game for Colorado. I thought he looked really good. He used his legs. Yeah. He did have some downfield opportunities, which didn't really matriculate much at Liberty last year, and so it felt like he was very comfortable in that system.
I'm
But
stock up on Colorado. I think that they're going to be a little bit more of a tougher out in the Big 12 than I thought they might be.
yeah, I agree. I think getting to a bowl game based off of that performance feels like they're going to find a couple of opponents in conference play to pick off and
Mhm.
find their way to the postseason. I couldn't tell if I was more nervous about Georgia Tech going forward or more bullish on Colorado based off of that. But then I had to remind myself it's week one. It's the
It's
truth
week
is
one.
probably somewhere in the middle. Um, but yeah, I do think the Colorado fall off based on what we saw may not be as extreme as what we kind of feared that it would be. Now, it's early, it's a long season. I'm sure health will play a factor in, making it to the playoff, making it to the bowl games, what have you. But I did like the way that Colorado looked overall in that game against Georgia Tech, and yeah, almost pulled it off. Talk to me about Auburn and Baylor. Do you have more hope for Auburn after that Friday night game, or do you have more concern for Baylor as the Tigers win 38-24?
Yes. No, I'm just
Good
kidding.
answer.
Man, so one thing I will say about Auburn is they found what was working and stuck to it, man.
And
Like
they
they
spammed
they
it.
were not they spammed the QB bash, and hey, it was working out. And Baylor had no answer for that. That's the concern for Baylor, is that you knew what was coming for the most part, and still couldn't stop it. But for Baylor, I think that's the big most that's the toughest defensive and offensive lines that they'll face the entire year. I think that facing those guys up front will give them a lot more confidence going forward, as they have another tough one against SMU this weekend,
Yep.
and then their Big 12 slate. So yeah, I mean, I'm not like out on Baylor as a Big 12 contender. I love how they fought back. And their offense found a lot of success in that second half. They were able to push the ball downfield. For Auburn, still want to see if that passing game is legit. And I don't know if it was more, we don't have to pass, so we're just not going to, we don't need to, so we're not going to do it. If it's not
Right.
broke, don't fix it. Or if it truly was, this is how we feel Jackson Arnold can lead us down the field, and we don't trust him to pass. So gotta get some more data points on that. I'll just be the first to say.
Yes, absolutely in need of Moss data points. Arnold 11 of 17 for 108 through the air. On the ground, 16 carries for 137 and 2 touchdowns. I mean, it truly
Some are calling
was.
him a poor man's Haynes King. Not me, but
It was like Baylor had never seen a mobile quarterback before, and it wasn't him going, Jackson football and just dodging tacklers. He was running right up the A gap. I mean, the seas parted like every down. And
uh,
there goes Jackson for another 20 yards. So listen, all credit to Auburn. They won this game. They pulled away. They kept Baylor at arm's reach. We doubted
something
their
tells me your
ability.
first SEC opponent might watch that film and adjust.
We doubted their ability to do that. When Jackson Arnold has to throw the football, though, I'm still concerned.
Need some data points.
Exactly. I'm gonna need them to show their work a little bit. And Sawyer Robertson for Baylor in a losing effort, 419 yards and
That's
three
concerning for
touchdowns.
Auburn too, right? Like that secondary kind of got torched a little bit.
They did. I mean, at the end of the game, it kind of felt like they were playing a little bit of prevent defense, just kind of keep things in front of them. I mean, it wasn't like Baylor was throwing the ball over their heads and, scoring a bunch of points. They found Michael Trigg for 7 or 8 catches. He got one of my helmet stickers this week. He was targeted 15 times. He only caught half of those. Most of those were the fault of Sawyer Robertson, but Trigg also dropped a fourth down that could have kept Baylor in the game in the end zone. So
This
it
game
just
was kind of like a couple 10-year-olds playing a football video game. Like they have two plays that work, or they only know how to throw to one button, and
yeah,
it
yeah,
just
it did feel a little bit like, okay, I think we're just running coach suggested plays here, and maybe not a whole lot of creativity other than just, hey, it's working, so I'm going to keep running it. I will give Auburn's defense credit. They looked good for 4 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. They had 3 passes defended, so swatted passes. They just looked like the more physical team, and they
Yeah.
dominated Baylor in the trenches. It was not close. On the other hand, listen, we might have over exaggerated Baylor's ability to win games. We might have bought in a little bit to Baylor torching some bad teams down the stretch in the Big 12. Dave Aranda looked confused. He looked like he was out of answers. And again, Auburn's faster, stronger, more physical. But I do wonder against the Arizona States and against the Texas Techs. I know you're not playing Texas Tech, but you get my point. The bigger physical defensive lines going against your offensive front, your defensive line's inability to stop the run. I've got questions about the green and gold, and they're going to start when they come to Dallas this week. Previously, I was kind of writing SMU off. I kind of figured Baylor would roll in and just be the more talented team, maybe be the more physical team. I don't know about that anymore. We're going to preview that game with our friends over at the Mustang Mood this week, so be watching the channel for that. But suddenly, I feel like SMU not only has a chance, they might be my pick in that game.
All right. Welcome back to the SMU bandwagon, buddy. We got your seat warm right over here.
Temporarily lost the way. Last thing that we'll kind of focus on, South Carolina, they turned the engine over against Virginia Tech in the Beamer Bowl. They win 24-11. Really ugly offensive game at times for both teams, but Lenoris Sellers seems like he's on track, ready to go for this year. The guy is still just impossible to tackle. He had multiple runs where Virginia Tech defenders are just bouncing off of him like, he's wearing a bulletproof vest. I think South Carolina looked good. They looked very fast on defense. Anytime you've got Dylan Stewart rushing the passer, you're going to look good. But that defense had Kyron Drones just in hell today, and I think it was a good start for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, concerns on the offensive line. There
Sure.
were a few coverage busts there. That's again week 1, so there's plenty of time to get that tuned up. But yeah, this team's going to go as far as Lenoris Sellers can take him. Still waiting on that wide receiver to figure out. Nick Harbor was robbed of, in a similar way to LSU, was robbed of a really awesome touchdown catch that was overturned. But yeah, I mean, not a lot to say about this game. Honestly, it kind of felt like both teams were kind of stuck in first gear for most of it. South Carolina pulled away late. We'll learn a lot more about South Carolina very, very soon as the meat of their schedule heats up. I had a couple more I wanted to throw at you really quickly before we get out. North Dakota almost beat Kansas State.
Your Kansas State Wildcats.
My Kansas State Wildcats almost
Big 12
lost to not the good North Dakota school, not the excusable North Dakota school. No offense to North Dakota, but you're no North Dakota State, and you almost beat Kansas State. Avery Johnson found a way to lead a game-winning drive almost at the gun
with like 30 seconds left. Right, was
they
when they
scored
got
the go-ahead touchdown with like 30 seconds left. Yeah,
Ugh.
and then held on defense, but concerns. It's very concerning, especially on the defensive side of the ball for Kansas State right now. We'll chalk that one up to jet lag, I guess, and hope that they can tackle better against Army next week. Gonna have to learn how to do that really quickly. And then Utah 43-10 over UCLA in the late night last night. Devin Dampier. I don't know if you saw the Matt Leinart tweet that was comparing him to Kyler Murray, but
no, I didn't. Oh my goodness.
He said, and I quote, Devin Dampier is Kyler Murray. End quote.
What does that even mean? The college Kyler Murray? Because that's a good thing. The NFL Kyler Murray? That's not a good thing.
I'm guessing he means college. He balled out, though.
He did.
I was expecting that to be a little bit closer, honestly. I thought UCLA was gonna put up a little bit better fight, but Utah really pulled away in the third quarter and just made that one a laugher.
Well, it felt like Utah going into that game was like the Utah Utes, the Big 12 hopefuls. After that game, it was like Utah Utes, the Big 12 contenders. And again, week 1, possibly an overreaction. UCLA might be booty again this year. Nico Iamaleava certainly did nothing to back up his, well, I want more talent around me comments in the offseason because the Bruins looked terrible last night. But yeah, I mean, the defense for the Utes was never going to be the question. It was how quickly does this offense get up to speed? And evidently, pretty
One game.
immediately. Yeah,
Yeah, they immediately uh, are right there in the thick of it in the Big 12 for me, and they get a lot of their big games at home. Man, Kansas
they
State I think
do.
is at home, Tech's at home.
Yeah,
I think they host Arizona State too. Don't quote me on that, but a lot of big games being played in Salt Lake City. They have a interesting. I think they play UNLV. No, they don't play UNLV. I think they play Wyoming maybe this week on the road. So it's a really weird spot, but should be 2-0.
they certainly should. I think the Big 12 is going to morph, and we're going to be entertained by that all season long. I think the ACC suddenly looks like that could be very true. The other thing that I'll mention, Oregon in a blowout win over Montana State. Dante Moore looked very, very good.
He
The
did.
throws that he was making were championship caliber throws. And again, Montana State, excellent FCS opponent, certainly not a pushover, but a step below. But some of the windows that Moore was putting those balls through, I thought, okay, if you're making that against the Penn States and the Iowas, then my take that Oregon goes 10-2 and is not a championship contender is going to get stale really quickly. So hat tip to him. Certainly saw what he was doing out there on the West Coast in a very, very impressive win. Michigan
I got to go
didn't
back and watch that one. I didn't. I'll confess I did not watch much of that one, so it's on my
didn't blow New
list
Mexico
to.
away.
Did not blow New Mexico away, but if I comment, I'm just going to be talking about a box score. So it's
Yeah.
on my list to rewatch, actually watch this week. So we'll hopefully have some better thoughts leading into a big one against Oklahoma this week.
That's right, man. They go to Norman to take on the Sooners. That will probably haven't totally run down. We haven't made our final decisions on the big three. That one might lead our coverage for the preview episode later on this week. But week two certainly got some nice storylines. It's not as loaded as week one, but it's got some fun games. So plenty to look forward to. And we'll keep this season rolling right along. But partner, we're over an hour 15 for our first live show of the year. I think it's a good place to stop. Again, if you are finding us for the first time, if you're listening to the podcast, please hit subscribe. We'd love to have you join the Jimmies and the Joes. We really appreciate you guys hanging out late night with us on a Sunday night, early on a Monday morning, whenever it might be. For Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for spending your post game, your week one wrapped up with us. And until next time, so long, everybody.